Welcome to Lessons Learned, Growing a Community in a Virtual World. It's being presented by Dr. Jennifer Rowan. She is the current Director of Technology at Jefferson County Schools, located in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. She has received her Bachelor's of Arts in English Education and Master's in Science and Media Specialist from St. Vincent College in 2009 and 2013, respectively. So in 2020, she earned her doctorate in educational leadership from George Mason University, a Tier 1 research school. She completed her dissertation research on successful principals who have integrated technology and their staff to learn about the personalities and traits of those who are effective leaders in the K through 12 space. Outside of her education, she is a national board certified teacher and certified educational technology leader. Always a teacher at heart, she still misses the classroom, but finds that she enjoys the director's impact on an organization. And I'm sorry that I muddled through that as poorly as I did. I'm turning it over now.
That was great, Nathan. Thank you so much. And I see that Hillary is here. So hi, Hillary. It's nice to virtually see you sort of right now. And Julie, thank you. I do love to start things with music. Sometimes I just throw on some Pandora and that just like makes me feel good, I guess, right? So today we're going to be talking about growing community, and it is a community event. So it's going to be more question and answer and participation as opposed to just sitting and getting, because as part of a community, we have to participate together and create together. So let me share my screen here and we can get started with the presentation. All right. So this is a little different than I'm used to. Can you see my screen? And Nathan, just give me a verbal because I can't.
So I can see your screen.
Okay. Put that over there. Okay, that's perfect. All right. So to get started, one of the things that we have to do when we're part of a community, and we're all part of a community, is to learn a little bit about each other. So I'm just going to throw this up here and you tell me, how do you like your coffee, right? If we were in a conference together, face-to-face, we'd all be sharing some coffee. Tell me, which number are you? Do you like a lot of cream? You like a lot of, or a completely black? All right, so I see some 6s and 7 or 5s, sort of like right in the middle. Oh, Nathan does not like coffee at all. I get it. I like mine dark, so I'm going to go with number 3. So I'll put that in the chat. Thank you for those that are participating in the chat. I see that there's 9 people in here, so please feel free to do that if you can. Oh, Vern. Oh, Vern, it's nice to see you. Yeah, it's 0 for Vern. Vern, he does not like coffee. Oh, Sophie likes a little coffee with her creamer. See, it's something that we can all get around. I don't know how you survive, Vern. I have a 3-year-old. Pretty sure I can't survive without coffee anymore. My blood just wouldn't circulate or something crazy. Well, oh, and Kimberly, you don't like coffee. Well, I hope that, you can see, just going with something that's a little universal. We now know a little bit about each other, which is exciting within the next, first few minutes of a presentation. But what is community? And in the educational sense and in the educational community, we haven't really, we talk about community, but outside of education, it's kind of more defined out. We have community of action, we have community of circumstance, community of interest, community of place, community of practice, and then hybrid, which is you could have a community of action and a community of place. So what do I mean by that? By putting a label on your community or the group in which you're with, you can rally around a cause or a problem together as a group and find out what your roles are to solve the problem or, just continue in maturing whatever action you're trying to take. So I'm going to ask you for different ideas of what you think each community, or examples in your own life of what community will be. So a community of action in my own life could be I'm a member of the Unison EDU group. You can always look it up. It's a nonprofit that is designed to help those who are struggling with the digital divide. And this was a nonprofit that we created prior to the pandemic, and that is a community of action. All of us are there because of we want to take action on a specific problem within the greater society. So what other communities of action have you been involved in, or you can think of off the top of your head? And I'll just wait for the chat. Meals on Wheels, absolutely. Think of those communities in which you have to do something. It could be the National Heart Society, fighting heart disease. Let's go on and talk. Oh, church. Yeah, that actually can be a hybrid too. And that's a huge, if you're out and you're doing, if you're trying to get people to understand what your beliefs are within a church, then absolutely it can be community of action. Toys for Tots. Yeah, because you're doing something to help someone else, which is great. A community of circumstance is a situation that you happen to be together during a circumstance that affects you all. So 9/11, all of us probably remember where we were when we heard about the Twin Towers, what happened in Pennsylvania. The people that were around you were really what your community of circumstance was. Every single one of us have experienced like a traumatic event in that case. Or it could be any case. So go ahead and share, where were you when it was 9/11? Who was your community of circumstance during that time? For me, I was in 9th grade and sitting in a math class, and my teacher turned on the TV and said, "Something bad just happened." And we all watched as the second tower fell together. 8th grade middle school homeroom. Yep, you may even remember who was around you, who you talked about, sitting in the apartment in college alone. And that probably was hard. And in the absence of community, that can be difficult. Thank you for sharing. Play date with your 1-year-old. My brother was in 5th grade, and he was okay. So my dad was a facility director, and his coworker had military background, Air Force. And my brother was on a field trip in 5th grade, and they put out the map, and I'm from Pennsylvania, and my brother was 9 air seconds away from where it fell in Shanksville. My brother and I were hanging out, and Dad told you guys to turn on the news. Yeah. So that community of circumstance is something that we can all relate on, and because we've all experienced it. Community of interest. So if you are, Hillary, I have observing student teaching in 7th grade class. Oh, in Jefferson County. That's right. You are from here. We miss you. I'm sure we can find you a house somewhere if you want to come back. The community of interest. So a community of interest is really about something that interests all of you. So for instance, a group that gets together because they want to knit something, a knitting group, or a running club. A lot of our students are included in our communities of interest. Pokemon Go, yes, I haven't done that in quite a while, probably like when it first was a craze. But there is a lot of community. What are some other communities then, and think maybe of ourselves too, but think of our students. What communities of interest have they created in their space? And I'm from the K-12 space, but our higher education students also create communities of interest. So either space will work. Game night with friends. Yeah, absolutely. Think about their clubs too. Their, acting, soccer, sports. All of that is communities of interest. Community of place. So 4-H, other clubs, absolutely. Community of place, that's all about being in a particular place. And so you create a community around you, sort of like probably the community of maybe your first apartment building or a dorm that you lived in and everybody was placed there. Music festivals, that could be a community of interest and a community of place if you're like at Bonnaroo or something like that. And then we have a community of practice. And a community of practice, the street you live on, absolutely. Absolutely. Community of practice, that's what a lot of us are. We are right now in a community of practice for our craft. Today, we are in a PLN for like it is a community of practice. But you can also have these hybrid communities where you can have people that are in the same practice, teachers who are then taking action, or teachers who have that community of circumstance, or administrators who are all a community of place. All of those things are important. And just by labeling them and understanding what the real goal of your community is based on a specific problem can really help you with your communication between those in the community. So how do we grow community in the classroom? And I'm speaking specifically of the virtual space. Now I can go back and I can say, are there communities? We just thought of all the physical communities that we have. But let's talk about that in the digital space. And it's a lot easier now since we have had to build community over the pandemic span. We were not in a space where we couldn't talk to each other, we couldn't see each other, we couldn't touch each other. Like my husband was with me and my son. So that was good. We had a little, our family was together. But I feel for those who were single and alone during that time, because it probably was. I'm hearing reports of I didn't leave my house for 3 months and no one could come over. So maybe they only saw Zoom, but that physical touch wasn't there. So think about the community in a virtual sense as well. And tell me what community that you belong to now virtually, and label that with the community definition that we just went over. So 2 things, give me a community that you're in a virtual sense, and what type of community is it? And I can give you an example if you're stumped. I love The Bachelor. It's a little known fact about me. I love watching The Bachelor. It is so fun. And I listen to podcasts about The Bachelor, which is all about my English background about literary criticism. So it's all like these little criticisms of The Bachelor. And one I watch is called Almost Famous. And I'm in a Facebook group with all these other listeners of this podcast. And it's just so funny to see the conversations. Oh yeah, Hillary, she loves to camp. So it's a community of interest and a community of practice. And Facebook groups are interest for sure. Yeah, so community of practice, Cami and Google. And that's something that we've, and Jefferson County, we have said because let me go back. In Jefferson County, we are now putting in a learning management system for next year. A group of people got together. It took a very long time to determine which learning management system we were going to go forth and use. It was determined that Canvas was going to be what we were going to use going forward. So Canvas has a lot of these Facebook groups, and we are encouraging people to get on their social media, check out those Facebook groups, and then we're tagging each other in different questions that we have. So there might be a question that my coach puts out there and says, what is best practice for this? Or what's the community say? And we get tons of results, and then we can really get our mind around a problem. So then when our teachers come to us and say, what are we going to do? Or how do we do this? We can say, you have these 2 different options, and these are the reasons why, and these are the reasons why not you would take them. So I see Fortnite gaming, that would be their kiddos' practice and interest. Yeah, that's still a big thing. So definitely really, really fun. The community, growing community in the classroom, and I'm talking virtual classroom, and I'm talking physical classroom. Teachers have to think about 3 different classrooms, but this information is coming from like the virtual learning space. You have to think about the connection from the teacher to the student. And that seems pretty easy. You know, as teachers, we would know that that's supposed to happen. But we also have to think about the connection from the student to student. And then we have to also think about the connection to the student to the material. And all of these things have to be considered within the different types of communities. So in the classroom, building different communities around an authentic problem to solve for problem-based learning, and thinking about all these different types of connections can help grow community. In a community, we don't have a student in the back of the class who's sleeping because he's part of what's going on, or she is part of what is going on. They have an integral reason for being there. And that's why I think community not only is extremely important for everyone's well-being, but I also feel like it is important because it's going to help our students learn more in a world, or in an educational world where it's real world. You know, we don't take tests every day to make sure we know something. We do projects. So that growing that community and growing the roles within the classroom helps create students who are interdependent, but also researchers to figure out how to solve problems. And that's what's going to help us in our greater global society. And another thing is to choose the right method for the right time. So I'm trying to teach my group of teachers, because they keep saying, okay, what do I need to use this for? What is your expectation? And I say, okay, I'm not going to put a lot of expectations. I'm probably going to give you some minimum expectations, and I'm going to make that minimum go up so that I know that you're going to integrate technology in a meaningful way. But I want you to choose the right method for the right time. Sometimes the best technology is no technology at all. But I still want you to have a rationale for why you're choosing the tool and the methodology, because you think this is going to be more bang for your buck, right? You're always trying to think, what's going to be my return on investment of instructional time to help my students grow faster, grow longer, instead of it being more like, I'm going to do this worksheet because I've been doing it for 20 years. Well, great. I mean, is that the best method right now? And it could be, but why is it the right method? And just to really help people become more reflective upon their practices and update practices as we go along. Now, let's think about the pandemic. Because a lot of this is growing community in a virtual world based upon the pandemic. And this is when I really realized it was a big deal. Because I knew all this stuff before, but this is when I said, whenever we went into lockdown March 13th, which is a Friday, March 13th. We then were in lockdown until July here. And it's pretty bad in the Eastern Panhandle for a while. And I live in Virginia, so I just live over the border here because there's a lot of states that border each other. And so I was trying to keep track of all these different rules in all the different states. And so when we did that, I thought, we have to create community. We have to stay connected as a school district somehow. We have to give these people an outlet. At that point, we didn't know how bad this was going to be. We've never lived through a pandemic before. We had people dying. We had people getting sick. We were afraid to be around each other. There was a lot of fear. And so how do you create that community or that sense of belonging in a time where you are physically apart? And that was our big question. And just a little background. So this is my third year. So I've been here 2 years. And this is my third year going into the director position. And I've loved it so far, but it's been quite a whirlwind. I get the job and then we have that pandemic. But teachers did not have devices. We had devices that didn't have cameras on them. They were 10 to 15 years old. Our students didn't have devices either. So, and the devices that we did have weren't like configured to go home with filtering. So it was really, really, really tough during that time. A lot of the students, we ended up buying 1,000 devices, Chromebooks, getting them sent directly to the house, because that was another thing. How do I get devices to people that I don't want to put my staff at risk if I don't have to? How can I take out any middlemen or a pickup? So I worked with a vendor and they helped me do shipping. So it was a little bit more expensive, but there was no contact. So FedEx would take the devices directly to the children's houses to try to get them to complete some learning during that time. So we had daily trainings. We had coffee chats. Coffee chats were simply a way for people to get together and talk. So if they had questions about the school district, they were able to throw those out there. And we did them in programmatic levels. If they just wanted to, and this is how I trained my team, I said, guys, if they just want to get out of their living room with all their kids and have some adult conversation with people who understand what they're going through, let that happen. Let those conversations happen. It doesn't have to be we are completely focused on curriculum right now. We have to all realize we're going through this traumatic experience together. We also have lunch and learn. So with our learning management system this year, I did a 4-day training, and it wasn't me that was training, it was the Canvas people, but we did like a 4-day retreat with selected teachers. So we're doing a tiered approach to our professional development. We do that. And then for anybody else who wants to volunteer their time during lunch, I will get online and I will answer questions. And then I have certain topics for our lunch and learn activities. So today from 12 to 1, my responsibility was to get on there and talk about what does it look like to a parent? What does this look like to a student? And then if anybody shows up, I explain everything to them. I help them get into the program, and then they can look forward to the next time. Technology training. So we had daily trainings during the pandemic from March to May until the end of the year. So one of the things that was really important to our superintendent was to make sure that everybody is fulfilling their obligations to our community, to our Jefferson County community. And so teachers were given different options of training, but also our coaches, because we have like 12 to 15 instructional coaches in Jefferson County, led all of the different daily training. So we asked what the teachers wanted. They wanted CAMI training. They wanted Screencastify. They wanted Edpuzzle. They wanted Google Classroom, because that was another thing. We didn't have a learning management system when all this happened. So we had to go with Google Classroom, which was great. It worked out great, but no one knew how to do it. And for me, I never taught Google Classroom in a virtual sense. I've always been in front of people to teach that type of material, because it's a lot of material. And so they had to learn that based on, synchronous training opportunities. And then if they missed it, because we were using Zoom during that time, and it was the free Zoom, so you could only get 100 people in a conference at one time. If they missed it because we had people waiting to get onto our trainings every day, then they could go back and watch the recordings. And then we also have questions and answers to help people feel like they are part of a community, and not only to help them feel, but to value them and value their voice and say, yes, you matter, and I want to answer your questions. So for the learning management system, we had about 80 to 90 participants, and it's brand new to all of us. And so they're going to be like our ambassadors. And those ambassadors are going to help teach. So not only do we have the coaches learned alongside the ambassadors. The ambassadors are next door to the teachers who are working, or to the teachers who are just learning it. So it's that tiered approach, building the capacity within our own community here. So the frequently asked questions document, whenever we would have a Canvas training. So they only allow 50 people for an exorbitant amount of money, in my opinion, for a half hour, for an hour, 50 people for an hour. So I had to have 2 sessions going on at the same time. And then they would come back and ask questions, not only about how the system works, but also about how are we going to communicate that? How are we going to explain this to parents? What's our rollout plan? Different curriculum questions. And of course, our functionality questions, like how does the grade book work? We're going away from live grades and we're going to pick up Canvas grade book. How is that going to look? Can I still weight my grades? And those are all things that not only are important, but for me as a leader of a community and instructional technology, it allowed me to kind of get ahead of what are the questions that I'm going to have for the greater teaching community. What questions do my parents have? Because some of those people are parents as well. And how can I mitigate any stressors prior to them happening, so that people feel comfortable taking these steps with me and taking risks with me? So the question and answer document, I kind of shot myself in the foot though during those times, because and I did that for the pandemic, but that was just an example for the Canvas questions. So for the Canvas questions, there were 30 pages of questions. And so I went through each of those questions. And so I'd be up until I couldn't, I would be up until I couldn't be up anymore. Like I would fall asleep on the couch because I was just answering questions as fast as I could. But what that allowed me to do was take a look at all their questions and then categorize their questions. Oh, this is for communication. So these are things I'm going to work with our communication officer on, or this is for curriculum and instruction. I'm going to work with my deputy superintendent and the coordinators on this. So it just allowed me to understand in a bird's eye view, who in my community do I rely on to help make these decisions at the director level and the central office level, but also how do I help my teachers who have all these questions as well, and how are I going to funnel all this information so everyone feels comfortable? We also have, and I'm just going to pause there because I said a lot of things. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and I will definitely get to them as we move along here. I wanted to show you, you said that was a FAQ document. Yes, and I can show you, I can bring it up. Let me just bring it up here. Give me a second and I can show you what that looks like. All right, so it's coming up now. And the question is, did you have issues with teachers that didn't want or know how to access it? All right, so the way that this worked, I met with the coaches prior to the Canvas training, and each coach, and you can do this with teacher leaders too. So if you don't have coaches, you can, make it work. But each coach had a small group. So we would have a Canvas training, and then we would come together as a big group. I would go over all the different questions that I felt like would benefit everyone. And then they would break up into their small groups of 5 to 10. And that allowed for that community of practice feel to happen. Because when you're in a big group of 100, you can't ask questions freely. You can't talk freely. You just too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So each coach had access to write on this document, not the actual participants, not the actual teachers. I mean, I can open it up, but I just wanted to funnel the information that way. And you can see I coded them, like on the left-hand side, I have this here. So I coded them and color-coded them to explain how they are all linked and grouped. Because that was basically for my benefit. And I put this on, teachers had access to all of this information that went through the training at any time. So there were people writing, there were coaches in there writing around 9 o'clock at night, at sometimes 10 o'clock at night. And I would get up the next morning and we would start having our training at 8 o'clock. Of course, I had my coffee and I would say, what are you guys doing in there at 10 o'clock at night? Like, you guys are thinking about Canvas too much, but hey, that's okay. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the dialogue. You can see I'm not even done with all this stuff. So I have to go back, and I took some of it to C&I to look over the questions, and then I took some to the rep to answer those questions. But I plan to have this document kind of done before all of my teachers come back for the fall, so they can look through how we have navigated some of the questions that they probably are going to have themselves. So I hope that helps. And they all accessed it from the agenda that was provided to them. And this is a Google Doc. I don't know if you're a Google person or a Microsoft Doc person, but we just found it was a little bit easier to use Google. So I wanted to show you virtual toolbox. So this is how we organized all of our work during the pandemic. So they had a virtual learning overview, digital best practice. So some of the coordinators, we all did a list of all the things we wanted to cover and research and get out there. The coaches thought I was crazy because they looked at me and they said, okay, well, when do you need this by? And I was like, well, you're home tomorrow. We're on a stay-at-home order. So I'll see you tomorrow at 3 with that done, right? And so it was a really quick turnaround. We were up and running when we went out on March 13th. Everybody was prepared with 2 weeks worth of packet information. Within those 2 weeks, we created this for our staff. That was not the plan. That just happened to be the plan. And we had some telework guidance here. To help people understand what are the rules. Like FERPA still applies. You can't just put things on Facebook and say kids' names. That's not okay. Just because we're in a pandemic, we're still going to create privacy, stuff like that. And also to set boundaries. This was one of my favorite ones that we put together, is just setting boundaries for yourself and family. And of course, I'm talking about working at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like the worst at setting my work life balance. boundaries. But I think that it is very important, and at that point, to allow teachers and staff members to understand that they absolutely need to unplug, and it's okay to say, I am done at 3. Just because I'm in the same space or I'm in my community of place does not mean that I have to respond to an email that a parent sent at 7:00 at night. So then once we started it, it kind of started to grow. So pupil services started to do some more training. I don't know if they have this document may have been deleted since then. And at the end, we had a few days of professional learning days that we said, these are the things you must do. You must learn these things. And even though we've navigated away from Google Classroom, that was a step. For me, that was super important for all of my staff to understand that, because now they're going to understand Google, Canvas so much better. Because if we didn't have that step, it would be way too overwhelming. So you can see we did forms, teams, Screencastify. We also did cultural relevant teaching. So we had a guest speaker come in every single week of the pandemic. Some of them were my friends, and I'm like, hey, you're doing anything? Because everybody's still in lockdown, right? Dr. Hathaway, who really works in the research on communities and virtual learning. Dr. Garrett Whitney, she taught us about the different ways to connect, like the connections between student to student, student to teacher, and student to material. And then Dr. Howard Bostick, she's from Shepherd University, and she was friends with the professional learning person that I was working with, and she did a lot of guest speaking on cultural relevant teaching, and that was really great because it was just a good time to focus on it. And now we have a big program. And then we had some may do. So we had the must do. Okay, you have to do these. And then they had a takeaway form that they completed. Let me just show you that form real quick. And then this is the may do. These are the things that, what is your passion? What's going to be your interest? And there's going to be certain things that are appropriate for different programmatic levels, like Seesaw. If you haven't checked that out, it's a really great way to create a digital portfolio. But that's more for younger kids. And then virtual reality is for the older kids. And this is the takeaway form that they had to do. So this is how they got their hours for the year. You can see we had at least 4,000 teachers complete this, and they got an email every time that they completed the form. Basically, it's what school they worked for and then what takeaways did they have. We also wanted to make sure that our communication efforts were being, safely done. Before all of these tools came out, people were connecting through their personal cell phones, and that's not exactly kosher when we're working with students. So this is different ways that we help them get their communication up and running. And we gave them things that they could send out to students or parents to help them. Different presentation tools. We have a Nearpod subscription, and then Sway, which all of West Virginia has, and Edpuzzle, which hopefully we're going away from that. It's becoming too money oriented. We just went to Google before we left. So I had been working with maybe 4 teachers in a pilot for 100 students before we went out for break. So this is something that they had to learn as well on their own. And we tried to give them as many resources as possible. But unfortunately, it was just the way of the pandemic. We also wanted to make sure they had an idea of like what's some fun ideas that you can do with your classroom. And then different resources for virtual learning. Visti is another organization that I belong to as well. And it has a conference that is really good too. And it helps me really stay sharp. Shake Up Learning as well. She had tons of resources for distance learning. Ditch That Textbook, if you've never heard of that. And then Control Alt Achieve. So that is how we try to create community. We had a virtual space, but we also gave opportunity for teachers to learn together, to grow together. And, while that was really, really, really a difficult time, I thought anything that we can do to help people during that time would be in everyone's best benefit. So I have some questions for discussion. What was your experience during the pandemic? I think all of us have, a community of circumstance. We're all a part of that. And what is the importance of community to you and your school district? And these are just more, we can talk about it for sure, but there's also questions that you can talk through with yourself and with your colleagues. And how do you create and embody community? So go ahead and look at those 3 questions, and I'll make them bigger so that you can see them. And go ahead and put in the chat. You can answer 1, 3, or ask a question yourself, or just tell us a little bit about your experience. Okay, your school met weekly on Teams meetings. That's awesome, Kimberly. It's important. Yeah, because we were looking at it from a district perspective, but from the school perspective, I would argue that school community is probably more important than even the district community. District community is important, but school community, that's where your close-knit people are. I remember leaving when I was an instructional coach, or a technology instructional coach before this. And I remember leaving the classroom, and it was just so sad that I didn't realize how much I will miss my teaching buddies. Because I thought I saw them every day, and we would have these weird conversations, and then I didn't anymore. And so that was tough. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me today. I hope that there are some nuggets that you can pull from some of this insight. I really appreciate your time and sticking with me during the session. We did have one more chat information come in. I was one of the is that what does TA tax stand for? And during those 2 weeks, teachers developed their remote packets. And after a bit of time, I was tasked with facilitating the creation of all the remote lessons. Oh my, that is a big ask. Okay. All right. TIS and coach. Okay. So you got that dual role. We got all the hats. Sophie, that is, I'm sure was very hard. So kudos for you for making it through. And fun. Yeah, it was definitely, I'd say the people in technology, we definitely had fun during. It was stressful, but it was definitely fun. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that I see you in the next session. I'll be sharing some, because today it was supposed to be myself and a coach, but my coach had a change of heart and he decided to leave and go to Florida and leave us all and live at the beach. So I can't blame him for that, but we certainly miss him. But the next session that I'll be running is actually right after this, and it's about school leaders and their personalities and what I found in some research that I did at George Mason. All right, have a great day.